The silence right before a car engine gives up on an icy highway is a sound you never forget. It is that brief, terrifying split second where momentum stops, traction vanishes, and you realize you are no longer in control of where you are heading. That exact suffocating silence filled the room as I sat across from standard corporate hubris. The sleek glass office smelled faintly of overpriced espresso and unearned confidence, a stark contrast to the sheer panic hiding just beneath the surface of the man sitting behind the mahogany desk. My boss sat leaning back in his ergonomic chair, twirling an expensive pen with the careless arrogance of a person who inherited everything and understood nothing. He was explaining that the board had decided to restructure the company equity pool. In short, he was canceling my advisory shares to free up capital for newer hires. He wrapped his betrayal in sanitized management jargon, talking about lean methodologies and cutting dead weight. He looked at me with cold eyes, assuming I was just a tired old administrator who would break down, accept a small severance, and quietly drift away. He saw an easy target because he only knew me as the quiet woman who organized compliance files and sat in the back during strategic meetings. He saw a placeholder, a relic from the past who could be swept aside to make his impending buyout numbers look slightly more attractive to outside investors. He did not realize that I was the person who actually built the legal infrastructure he was currently standing on. I did not scream, I did not cry, and I did not sign his single-page forfeiture document. I simply folded my hands, asked if that was all, and calmly walked out. Back at my small desk near the server room, a strange sense of clarity washed over me. He thought he had just streamlined his balance sheet, completely unaware that he had just declared war on the majority owner of his own enterprise. Years ago, before the polished glass and fancy coffee bars, this company was nothing more than a failing operation running out of a cramped basement. His father, the original founder, had called me late one night in total desperation. The business was drowning in regulatory debt, facing audits, and on the absolute brink of total collapse. I spent 6 months living on stale coffee and pure willpower to clean up their books, restructure their debt, and keep the entity afloat. Because there was no actual cash to pay my legal invoices back then, the founder signed a very specific convertible advisory agreement. It was a protective clause designed to guard against hostile takeovers or corporate negligence. If the company went 2 full years without paying dividends, or if the board failed to hold certified annual meetings, my advisory units automatically converted into super voting stock at a 10-to-1 ratio. Over the next decade, the original founder stepped back, and his arrogant son took over the chief executive role. The son hated formal meetings, skipped official governance protocols, and poured every cent of profit into flashier perks rather than paying out dividends to shareholders. He never bothered to read the historical filings or understand the foundational agreements signed during the dark days. The automatic conversion clause had triggered 3 full years ago. Without anyone upstairs realizing it, my small percentage had quietly transformed into over 52% of the total voting power. I had remained silent for years out of respect for his father, hoping the young executive would eventually mature into a real leader. But watching him dismantle the equity of the hard-working staff to pad his own buyout check shattered any remaining loyalty I held. Instead of filing an immediate lawsuit, I decided to wait for the exact moment of maximum leverage. The company was in the middle of closing a $400 million acquisition deal with a massive conglomerate, and the final signing was scheduled for the following week. In the days leading up to the transaction, I watched from my corner office as the executive team frantically polished their financial reports. They were aggressively altering expense spreadsheets, burying regulatory non-compliance issues, and hiding my legal ownership from the buying firm. They believed my silence was a sign of submission. When I quietly walked into a pre-deal meeting to set down water bottles, the executive dismissed me like a servant, completely oblivious to the paper trail I was actively documenting right under his nose. The night before the big signing, I met with the original founder at his hotel lobby. He was older now, tired, and deeply saddened by what his son had become. I showed him the altered filings and explained how his son was about to commit massive securities fraud just to push the buyout through. The founder closed his eyes with a heavy sigh, realizing that his son was about to destroy everything they had built. He handed me his original signed copy of the advisory agreement and told me to do whatever was necessary to save the company. On Thursday morning, The penthouse conference room was filled with top-tier corporate lawyers, investors, and executives from the acquiring conglomerate. The atmosphere was charged with excitement as $400 million hung in the balance. My boss was practically glowing with pride, sitting at the head of the marble table and preparing to sign the official documents. He was seconds away from executing a deal built entirely on falsified cap tables and hidden equity, completely unaware that the trap was about to spring closed. I opened the glass doors and walked straight into the conference room, carrying a simple leather folio. The lead attorney for the acquiring company paused, holding up a single document they had flagged during a last-minute audit check. She noted that a historic Class B instrument mentioned in older filings appeared to be missing a signed release form. My boss nervously laughed it off, claiming it was just an old advisory agreement for a former employee that had already been cancelled and dealt with. I stepped up to the table, laid out the original contract, and introduced myself as the primary owner. I presented the verified banking records showing 12 years of unpaid dividends, along with corporate logs proving 3 consecutive years of missed board meetings. The room fell into absolute silence as the lead buyer realized my shares had automatically converted into controlling voting power long ago. My boss sat frozen in his chair, his face draining of color as the reality of his mistake finally hit him. The lead attorney closed her binder, turned away from my boss, and asked if I was the true majority shareholder. I confirmed that I held over 52% of the total voting interest and that no transaction could occur without my explicit authorization. When my boss tried to scream about a takeover, his own father quietly ordered him to sit down and accept the reality. Realizing he no longer possessed the legal authority to sign anything, the young executive gathered his papers and walked out in complete disgrace. I took the seat at the head of the marble table and immediately took control of the negotiations. I informed the buyer that the acquisition could move forward under fair terms, but with several non-negotiable adjustments to the final structure. We officially reinstated the employee option pool using a portion of my own shares, ensuring that the staff who actually built the business received their fair payout. My former boss was stripped of all operational authority, removed from the board, and left with only his basic minority payout. Real power never needs to shout, make grand speeches, or wear expensive titles to prove its existence. True leverage belongs to the people who understand the rules, keep their composure, and quietly do the necessary work in the background. Standing up for myself not only protected my own hard-earned legacy, but it also saved dozens of innocent employees from being cheated out of their future. As I sat in that quiet corner office looking out over the city, I knew the foundation was finally secure.